Okay, welcome back. And today, my guest is Daniel High. And this is Daniel 2.0, kind of. We're having another go and another interview, which is going to be fun. And, we've known each other for a long time. Dan and I used to be housemates, and we've got a lot of history, so we're probably going to have a fairly decent chat today. But the new news is that the Western Australian borders are open. So that's pretty interesting. So what's going on, Dan? What's happening with that?
There's never enough time to do it right, Keith, but there's always enough time to do it twice, as I like to say. No, very interesting. So the West Australian borders are open for, probably the first time since this all struck. But if you're still not able to come in without quarantine if you're from Victoria or New South Wales. So it's what they affectionately call a controlled border, not an open border, Keith.
Yeah, right. So that's one control that's in place is the having the quarantine, which I'm guessing is the standard 14-day effort. And is it self-funded as well? That's not like government funded. If you come in, you've got to pay for all that shit yourself.
I'm pretty sure, yeah. I mean, I think there might be some exemptions or what have you, but yeah, I think people have to pay for it themselves.
Yeah, right. I was talking to Tim in Victoria when, he was telling me about that big, huge fiasco they had with the, second outbreaks and quarantine, just fuck ups, really, and just crazy stuff going on there. But he was saying that they'd had the offer of having the military take care of it, like the quarantine setup. But who's taking care of it in WA, the quarantine? Is it military?
I think it's police,
Yep.
police and kind of border control,
Yeah.
kind of collaboration. I think they had the army at some stages when they kind of need to deploy a lot of people quickly. But yeah, it's an interesting one. I think people have definitely seen a place like Perth differently. After all this, I think so maybe a bit more appreciation of the good points compared to what we've seen, in other places, etc. Yeah, it's not
Yeah.
always a bad thing
Yeah. Well,
being
I
kind of
mean,
smaller and
yeah.
a bit more isolated, I guess.
Yeah, well, that's the key word, isn't it? Isolated. So you don't have to really go into isolation; just go into Western Australia because it's. I'm pretty sure it's the most isolated capital city in the world. Right?
I think no, I think it technically, I think there's somewhere in Hawaii that's more isolated as a capital city. So I don't know that's technically true, but definitely up there for sure.
And reaping the benefits, right? Reaping the benefits, reaping the rewards of being an isolated uh, place.
Yeah.
It's an upside, and I don't know. People. I guess they think because it's isolated, it's kind of maybe backwater, or I don't know. There are definitely certain perceptions about Western Australia within Australia, like from the other states. But it's a beautiful place. Western Australia is a really beautiful place. It's kind of like Australia's secret to a certain extent. I don't know.
Yeah,
Like you live there,
I'd
so
agree
it's
with that.
yeah,
Yeah, I agree. It's kind of it's got a best kept secret kind of vibe about it, and I think deep down inside, a lot of people are quite happy to not have it on the main radar of a lot of other places.
people in Western Australia. You mean happy?
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. I think it had that vibe while I was living there. I lived there for 23 years, I think. When I came over on I might stay for 5 years or something was kind of my thing. But also, that's another side of that isolation. It's kind of difficult to move, or it used to be. I think maybe not so much now. Like when I went there in pre 2000, it was a lot more difficult to move states than I think it is now. But yeah, it's a pretty cool thing. It's a pretty cool thing. So what have you been getting from the media, like social media or whatever forms of media, about COVID? Like, what was the impression? Because it's been a few months.
Yeah, it's kind of a bit like a lot of things. I think in Perth, it runs very counter-cyclical to the more populous cities that are on the eastern seaboard. So, we've had very little restrictions. I think the only restriction we've really had is maintaining 2 meters in entertainment venues. So nightclubs, everything has actually still been open for quite a while here.
Yeah, yeah,
But I guess everyone is kind of thinking the more people you let in, the greater the chances. And I guess one of the things the medical profession has been saying is because people are perhaps, I wouldn't say out of the habit, but haven't had to socially distance, that if something does go wrong here, it has a much greater chance of spiraling out of control because no one's really got those little aspects in place.
yeah, yeah. The yeah. So it's kind of like you guys didn't have to do so much, uh, or the restrictions weren't so hardcore. So now you kind of, if it does go bad, it might be because it's been kind of easy for you or easier for you guys.
Yeah, I think that's always at the back of your mind, definitely. But I guess also too, I think really weirdly, just the type of industry that's here in Perth and WA, it's a bit little less exposed to those fluctuations that have happened with your Sydneys and Melbournes that have so many international students,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
um, or that rely, I guess more heavily on tourism, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, it's actually it's talking about international students, right? So the school I work at is basically a school that is, designed, and its purpose is to teach students who are going to go and learn overseas. And I've noticed that, I mean, we had a parents meeting last week with the parents and that, and the amount of parents now who are saying, "I'm going to send my kid to Shanghai. I'm not going to send them to
Mhm.
Australia. I'm not going to send them to America. I'm still concerned that the rest of the world's not really dealing with this thing very well."
Yeah, right.
And that could be a really big problem for internationally, because the education around the world relies on, like most businesses as well, and countries rely on Chinese money, and I
Mm.
think there might be a flow on from the international student thing in educational institutions in Australia. I think it's quite possible that it could be really detrimental to Australian education in like the
I
upper
think it will
tertiary.
be. I think they're just waiting to find out if their next year's intake will actually be able to physically, get into the country, or without a kind of quarantine and what have you. So um, yeah, watch this space. It's definitely interesting stuff.
Yeah.
Kind of does make me think. I'm kind of in some ways amazed at how well the world. I mean, not that anyone has any choice, I guess, to do otherwise, but I am pretty surprised at how effective um, the world seems to have been able to have adapted so many things. I'm not saying it's necessarily being dealt with as well equally everywhere. But it is kind of amazing how people have managed to change their lifestyles, and certainly, I guess my thoughts would have gone out to what some people would have been experiencing in second and third lockdowns, because I think if you were, for instance, someone that had just moved to Melbourne to enjoy the city life or a job in the city or something, and you were single or whatever, and you'd been stuck in a little apartment for such
Yeah.
an amount of time, I think it'd have a big effect.
Well, also that job that you went there for, you may not have anymore. There's always that side of it that I'm sure lots of people have become unemployed in this
Oh
time.
yeah.
Yeah, and
Mm.
that's really frightening. And I have seen some things. I don't get much news from Australia here, but I have seen some things about like suicide rates and stuff climbing and being quite high. Um, yeah, so I mean, it's a really, really interesting thing. Now, on this whole thing of trade with China and like education being one part of it, like I was saying, I don't really get much information from Australia. These things, when I talk about things, they come across my desk. And when I talk about that, that's like the Chinese teacher that sits opposite me says to me, China's having a trade war with Australia. And I'm like, what? What's going on? And, there's imports being banned and stuff. Have you heard anything about that?
Yeah, I think it's, obviously in the papers and what have you, but not really something that I'm intimately familiar with.
Yeah,
Mm.
right. Yeah, I've seen things on Facebook where like really reactionary stuff, which just seems ridiculous to me. It's like, oh, well, China's not going to take this from us, so we should stop sending them iron ore for 3 months. And I thought about that, and I thought, right, so all the people that work in mining who aren't going to be working for 3 months because of you stopping that, that's going to hurt the economy. And then, do you think? I mean, it's just this incredibly, I don't know, maybe Australian idea that we can hurt China. We can actually hurt them by stopping doing something, which is just seems insane to me. It's like saying, oh, we could hurt America by not going there. We won't be tourists to America, and that'll hurt them, like because we may be some percent of some tourist numbers that go there. But it just seems insane to me that people are like wanting to fight against China rather than, I think we need to find a quick solution to this and let's get back on with business, because not having China as a business partner, I think, is not good for Australia. I don't think that that's the way you want to go. I know that the media does tend to paint China in a bad light, and for whatever reason they choose to do that. There's in the Western world, China does get painted in a bad light. But it seems to be at the, ignorance of how much Western countries rely on China and rely on having a good business relationship with China.
I imagine, yeah, pretty much all the countries in the Indo-Pacific would be in that position.
Yeah, it just seems crazy to me that like this mentality of we should battle China about trade. Uh, you know, China buys stuff because they want to have trade. They rarely buy stuff because they need it. Because if you turn over anything in your house, there's 90% chance it'll say made in China, and they're
Mm.
already in China, so they can get hold of pretty much anything they need anyway. They like to do things with us because they like to have trade. They like to trade. There are some things that we have that they might like, but it's not. I don't think there's anything that China buys that's out of necessity. Maybe iron ore, because they want a lot and they're constructing all the time. A lot of construction here, but you
Is
know,
that visible? Do you
oh
see a lot of that, Keith, or
yeah, I see
is it
it.
kind of more?
Yeah, I see it every day when I go to school. They're building a hospital over the road from the school, which I've been watching the last couple of years, and the building's nearly completed. Probably about, I think maybe 10 stories, maybe a bit more than 10 stories. It's pretty big. It's a decent sized hospital. I think I'm trying to work out if they've put a helipad on the top. But yeah, it's a pretty decent sized building. But also driving around, in where I live, there is a lot of construction of high-rise apartments. So pretty much everything in China seems to be high-rise apartments. You don't tend to buy a house with land. There are places you can buy houses in like what you would have sort of a locked place.
Gated community.
Yeah, gated community. Yeah, that's what I was looking for. Thanks. In China, but they're big places, so they're multi-story, and they're bumper to bumper. They're like townhouses. They're not. It's no yards or anything. You don't have land. You just have a building, and
That's interesting, isn't it? Because China's still pretty big.
It's
I guess
a huge
there's
place.
just
Yeah.
a lot of mountains that are uninhabitable, is there? Or
I don't know. It seems that they like to keep the country, and the city, and everyone goes to the city to work, and that's where the factories are and things like that. And people live in the city, but they live in apartments. There's not the city's not houses, the city's apartments. It's pretty much
certainly more efficient that way.
it's a better use of space and a better for fitting people in. Definitely, if you've got like I think. Where I live, so Shangyu, right, which is the city I live in, is considered like a village, like a small town, very tiny. Mind you, the people here are very, very wealthy, so it's like a very rich small town, but it's a small town of 700,000 people. Which is that's a lot of people. That's a lot of people in a tiny little area. Yeah, so it's a small place, but it's lots and lots of people and crammed in, and lots of high rises, lots and lots.
What makes it wealthy?
I'm not sure exactly. I've been trying to work that out for a long time. Why there's so much wealth here? I think what it was I think a lot of people here were landowners, and they're like Australia. The government buys land or sells land, or land gets redistributed into high rises, right? So if you've got a few acres, like if you think let's say you've got 20 acres or 100 acres or something like that, potentially you're putting up a building that's going to house a few hundred people. And if you start looking at, maybe a couple of 100,000 per person that's getting housed, you've got a couple of hundred people and a couple of 100,000 per a couple of hundred people. You're talking tens of millions of dollars. So if you have land and then you've constructed on that land and then you're going to sell that and plus the government gives you money for giving up your land for the people, to build on it. And you also get benefits. So part of it seems to be that you also get property out of that as well. So like in your high-rise that you've built, I think you get X amount of things that are yours as well that it's just wholly profit as well from those. So yeah, it's but that's as much as I've been able to ascertain as to why there's so much wealth here. But there is, man, like serious money. Ferraris in the street. I see Lambos. I see, every other guy's driving an Audi or a BMW, or I see Jaguars. I see Range Rovers. I saw a Hummer. There was a Hummer outside my school the other day. Just and ostentatious wealth, of course, because the Chinese are like that. They're very showy with their wealth. It's about having pride. And being seen to be wealthy is very important. Like the Chinese don't say Happy New Year to each other. They say, I hope you get rich. That's that's Happy New Year in Chinese. It's like, I hope you get rich. I hope we get rich. I hope everybody gets rich. We all want to get rich, right? It's all about money. So yeah, it's an interesting setup. Anyway, I've been going on for quite a bit. So I have a question for you. So the last few podcasts I've been doing have been directors and actors, but you're an actor. Daniel. Yes, you are.
It's funny you mentioned this because a friend of mine managed to actually track down that movie, the actress, and took a few screenshots, and it was quite hilarious because it must be a very long time ago. I can't even remember how long, but I'd say at least 15 or 20 years.
Yeah, it's about 20 years. It's about 20 years since the actress. And actually, if you look at, I think Zach Hildige's IMDb, it's on there, like as a
Yeah,
movie
yeah.
that he made. Yeah, so that's kind of cool. So you could get yourself a little IMDb profile.
I'm actually on IMDb. You
Are
can,
you
yeah, as O'Sullivan from Sydney
really?
in The Actress. Yeah,
That's unreal. That's really cool.
it's pretty funny.
Yeah, that's a really cool thing to have too. Yeah, that's really really cool. So, as an actor, Dan, tell me about what that was like doing that because it was fun, right? Doing a student production. That was really cool.
Yeah, I think I got the guys access to that particular office, and I think I only got the role because I had a suit to be able to play someone from Sydney. But definitely fun. But I think I've always tried to help out. It felt almost like being a scout, a location scout, or uh, a silent producer, just helping getting it done. But I'd much rather be behind the camera than in front of it.
I just think it's like a really cool thing to have, and it's working with really good people like your friends, and making something together and being a part of that, is it's a good thing to look back on. I have very fond memories of those days doing those kind of things, and I reckon that's just a great thing to look back on.
I'd love to track down some of those movies from those eras in Subi, and I think wasn't quite Leadville you were in, but was it North Perth? You had a North Perth house for a while.
Yeah,
Um,
I lived in
but
CD Leedy. I lived in CD
a
Leedy
lot
for
of
a while.
movies kind of came out of that time.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, so it would. The irony was, I think it took me 18 years to see myself in that movie, and it was only when a friend got a hold of it. It's on some film subscription service. So he actually sent me a link, and I only watched it. I think this very year, in
Wow.
fact.
That's unreal. Yeah, so I because I was talking to Ant, I had Ant on the show a couple of weeks ago, and I was talking to him about some of those early films before we made the show, and he has links for those. He's gonna send them to me because I lent my copy of Fix to another guy, and it never came back. So I've been 20 years. I have it on VHS, and do you know how much use that is to me? Like none.
Yeah.
Like
I'd actually like to see that one again as well, you know?
yeah, I do have a couple of films here that I have on DVD that the directors gave me. When I did them, I've got one on like a thumb drive as well. But yeah, I'm really looking forward to getting a copy of Fix again, and The Pit, which was like a little war movie that we made at Ben Young's place, which was kind of cool as well, which was good fun. Yeah, but those were fun times. Definitely, that was sort of the roast night era back
It
back.
was.
Yeah, back then, and they were like really great times as well. Having the roast nights and very collaborative, and the world was in front of us, and we kind of it's sort of like we were all sort of united, I guess, at some point there, and it's sort of we've sort of separated and gone, spread out, and people have followed, done their things, and progressed in their lives in very, very different ways. But yeah, a great time, really great. And, it's sort of in my history, I look back on that as probably one of the best times in my life was the roast night era, the roast night era, the short, whatever it was, a year or whatever that lasted. But it was great. It was a great time. So last
Oh, I
time,
think it was about 3 years. There was a few different roast night eras, I reckon.
yeah, maybe, yeah, because there was when we were in Subiaco, there was the roast nights, and there were roast nights in North Perth, and there were roast nights in unbelievable.
Yeah.
So yeah, made it. Yeah, probably possibly 3 years worth of people getting together and thrashing out ideas, and having many different points of view and perspectives about those ideas. I found it really really good for me, just mentally. I think felt like that was like a big time of personal growth for me. In experiencing, hearing so many different ideas and being very open to the ideas of other people, and what they had to say. And on that, I think, I missed that. And one of the things about, you and I were talking earlier about social media. One of the things that I miss about that is that social media doesn't provide that. It seems to be very much a sense of when you have an idea on social media, it seems to be that either someone's 100% for you or someone's 100% against you. But there's no, oh, did you think about this? You very rarely see those kind of dialogues that we used to have, like in that roast night setup. You very rarely see a dialogue, oh, have you thought about this? And someone, oh, yeah, that's a great idea. And actually having one of those conversations like we used to do back then.
I think you're really right. Quite often have to, track certain things that are going on social media. And once you get used to reading the comments, you can almost, when an issue comes up, you can almost predict the kind of comments that people are going to get. And it blows me away because I just would never, ever conceive having enough time just to talk about things on social media.
Yeah,
You
yeah,
know, just it's more, I kind of use it maybe to connect with people that I wouldn't see in my everyday life. And I kind of use it to track articles or subjects of interest.
yep.
But I would just never have enough time in my life to, kind of get in a blow up with someone about how they feel about something that's been posted on social media.
Yeah.
I find it amazing, and I think you're right. You can, yeah, it really surprises me. People have the time.
Yeah, that's a really interesting point that you bring up, especially in the light of when we've just been talking about that documentary, The Social Dilemma, right? And how there are algorithms that predict, are there to predict how people respond to things. Do you think that perhaps, like you're saying, that you write something and you can predict, you have with a certain degree of certainty, how people are going to react to what someone said? Do you think, is it a chicken and egg situation with these? Like, is it, is the algorithm creating us, or are we creating the algorithm? In the sense that that there's going to be people that are going to react this way. Do you think without social media, and this is completely hypothetical, but if it hadn't existed, do you wonder if those people having been in or being subject to that conversation might have reacted to it completely differently? But now, through having a good 10 years of exposure to social media, that they're conditioned to response and they feel more free and they're being sent links and through via algorithms that are training them to make those responses rather than giving them freedom, but actually training them to react certain ways. Whee! I managed to capture that too. But it's back to me. Yes, we've had a technical difficulties. We're experiencing technical difficulties.
Wardrobe malfunction.
Yeah, for all the
Wardrobe
conspiracy theorists out there, just because I was talking about something that was quite meaningful, Dan doesn't work for deep state or anything. He's not there to to shut me down. But yeah. So what do you think? What do you think about that? Are we being trained by algorithms that are really supposed to be? We're
I
supposed to
think
be training.
I think definitely to a degree, but I don't know if it's as Machiavellian as that. I mean, I think that element's built into it, but I think it's more
I'm
just being able to blow up something that has interest one way or another. And that's kind of, I think its trigger is just to identify that there's stuff going on with the topic. And once that happens, I think it just then goes everywhere from there, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, I'm not suggesting that it's something that's considered. I'm just wondering if that's actually what's happening. If like the more you expose yourself to social media, the more or the greater likelihood that you're being trained or manipulated via algorithms. You know, like we think we're training the algorithm, and the algorithm learns this about us and responds to it. But you know, I think maybe it's a two-way street that perhaps we're learning from the algorithm and becoming different people.
I don't know. I do feel that definitely what you were saying before is really true. I think, wicked problems or complex problems are rarely solved with an either or approach. Usually I think the solution to complex problems is lots and lots of little things all slowly being put in place. And then over time, things get better or worse, I guess. But, I don't find that social media is a great way for having nuanced discussion about lots of little things that can all make a difference to a complex problem, because people always want the immediate yes, no, black, white kind of answer to most complex problems. And unfortunately, they actually don't exist for complex problems. It's rarely one thing you might do that makes the difference. It's usually a series of lots of things over a long period of time that make a difference.
Yeah, I look. I agree with that. I guess what I'm thinking about is the idea now of this black and white responses, or black and white answers, feels like perhaps historically a relatively new thing for us, and I wonder if it's exacerbated by the internet and about just that's how it is, and that perhaps so going back just as an example to roast nights, where we didn't need black and white answers, right? And we weren't even looking for black and white answers. We were looking to go somewhere kind of on a journey with an
Mm,
idea or something that we were talking about, and not necessarily needing to have it resolved. But it
mm,
feels like in the internet era, it feels like resolution is the goal, whereas the journey is
yeah.
not the goal. But I wonder if we're being trained that way just due to our exposure to the internet.
I think it would definitely contribute to that. It's something we discuss a fair bit about work, or at work, and it's being willing and able to have a respectful contest of ideas on a topic. Sometimes someone can be more persuasive in getting a decision across, but that doesn't necessarily mean, unless you contest the ideas, um, that it's the right thing to do. So it is important, to actually have that kind of debate without a predetermined destination. So like you're saying, sometimes it is more about the journey, and a lot of people these days do seem unwilling to change their opinion on things when they're presented with alternative facts. And it's really interesting, you know, how much, you can get away with just saying, oh, fake news or fake this or fake that. But yeah, it seems people kind of are very not set in their ways, or maybe set in their opinions to a lot of topics, and I guess there is so many disparate bits of data in either direction, saying, those complex problems are, it's really difficult to even know what the real facts and science is sometimes.
Very much so. I was having a conversation with my friend in New York about this just the other day, about how we have so much more access to information, and yet seems to be so much less access to truth, or to knowing what might be true, what might really be true. It seems, and I really struggle with this because there's so many. So I go back to uni days where like you're doing theories and you talk about theories and you're reading books, and so then the internet came along and now there's all this. You can Google it, or and you'll get, even on watching the Social Dilemma, when they say two people Google the same thing and get different things are sent to them purely because of algorithms that have already been, predetermined for that specific user, which is crazy when you think about it. Like, obviously there's not just one answer to a question anymore, does 1 + 1 = 2? Well, if you're person A, maybe it does. And if you're person B, maybe it equals something else. Or why are you asking about when, it's a conspiracy that, someone made up a conspiracy that 2 is the number. And really it's always been 3, but it's been hidden from you. And, but I know it's a terrible example, but that kind of thing is frightening, that the access to truth seems to be diminishing rapidly, like really rapidly. Yeah, and that scares me.
And I guess it's a herd mentality thing too, in terms of what topics generate enough herd interest to kind of be accelerated through those kind of systems. Can I ask you a question, Keith? Were
Yeah.
you one of the families back in the day that were able to afford the encyclopedias, like the actual bound encyclopedias that went in the house?
Yeah, we had. I think my parents had bought one for my brother. Because obviously, he was very studious, and did very well because of that. And I remember reading it. I think we may have had a Britannica. I don't think it was Britannica. I think we had a children's encyclopedia, some kind of children's encyclopedia. But the one that I had, man, was like super, super old, right? So
Yeah.
so I was born in the 60s, and I think this might have been, like, I had it with me for ages, man. I had it with me for a long time because because of how much the information in it changed. And I like to have it as kind of a record of the progression of, what this was truth before. This was truth before.
Knowledge.
And, knowledge, right? And in the short answer to your question is yes, we did have some kind of encyclopedia. I remember as a kid. Yeah.
Almost like a combination of a manual Google and a librarian service in one. But that was literally, what people went back to. It just
Yeah.
made me laugh when a lady was mentioning, the families that had the encyclopedias and the ones, that couldn't afford them, and it was always the reedy type houses that had the the old
Oh.
manual encyclopedias.
Oh man, my house was definitely not a reedy type house. I mean, I think maybe it was for my brother, I think, and possibly my sister. But for me, it was definitely not a reedy type house where I was like, no one ever sort of sat down. My dad never sat down with a book. My mum never sat down with a book. I never saw either of them ever sit down with a book. When I was really young, they used to read to me. They used to read to me at night. But yeah, not booky people at all. And I was never really, I learnt to read very early on. But I used to explore the books just because we had a lot at home. We had a lot of books. like those encyclopedias, and my parents were kind of collectors of the Time Life series books, that would come out that would
Oh
be
yeah.
about like countries or about animals and things like
Mm,
that. So I used to love those because they had great pictures as well. And
mm,
I'm not sure how much of it I read. I think I read quite a fair bit on it, but
mm,
I was just always fascinated by those kind of series of books that they had, and I really, really enjoyed them. As a kid, I'm talking, maybe 10 years old, sort of that age group, where I'd go through those, and some of them would be about the wildlife in North America or in Brazil or places like that. I found them quite fascinating and
mm.
beautiful photographs as well, like Time Life and those sort of things. And
National
National
Geographic.
Geographic, yeah, we definitely had a lot of National Geographics floating around as well. So yeah, I guess that was part of it. But really, I didn't start reading until I went to university. I read a little bit when I was in the army, just out of sheer boredom, sitting in the back of Land Rovers out in the middle of nowhere, and at night trying to stay awake. And all the guys used to have kind of horror books and stuff, so that would keep you awake. You read a horror out in the middle of nowhere at night when it's completely pitch black, and you're like, what was that noise? What was that? What was that? Yeah, you start reading horrors, and your mind starts playing tricks on you. So yeah, those were kind of good that I used to read out there. But yeah, I never really started getting right into reading until university, and it's really trailed off since then too. I've actually been thinking since watching The Social Dilemma that perhaps getting into some tangible literature that's not electronic might be a way to go, for the future. Yeah, that documentary, and I haven't finished watching it, but it's definitely given me a lot to think about. And in the sense of, I kind of feel like the more I think about it, the more I feel like, I'm not training my phone. My phone is training me.
Mm.
It's getting me to react in certain ways, and it's kind of, I don't know, controlling me. Maybe even that far. Maybe even controlling me to a certain extent. I mean, I found it very interesting to see in that documentary where people who created apps and were CEOs of apps and stuff like that, talking about their addiction to their phones and to
Mm.
email and to electronic things that are designed, I mean, they've spent the whole time trying to get people to be addicted to them so that they would get more clicks. And it's kind of worked on them as well, It's
100%. Yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
yeah, it's really
Starts off quite well intentioned, I'm sure, but sometimes these things just get so sophisticated they not even intentionally setting out to necessarily achieve that, but they just deliver far better than they thought they could, and it just goes a bit too down a certain path.
yeah, I think I'm not sure it's well intentioned. I think the internet, when it started off, was well intentioned, but I think it's about money now. And if you look at it, all the tech companies are now the biggest, like by a long way, And
Mm,
what are they selling? They're selling your data, you know.
totally.
Where yeah, insane. It's like one of the things that the whole of humanity got ripped off,
Mm.
Really, really full on. Yeah, but that documentary, it's definitely it sits with me, and it sits with me. I'm gonna revisit it, I'm sure, over and over, about
Mm.
just what they were saying and the implications of what they were saying, especially about like governments buying like parts of Facebook and being able to use them to manipulate their people, for voting and things like that. Anyway, so while we're on voting, did you follow any of the American elections?
Yeah, it was quite. I think a lot of people in Australia do. It's kind of weird when I think Australia has a fair bit of what would you call it, cultural or diplomacy power for a nation of only 25 million or whatever it is now people. In comparison to a lot of other countries, that is tiny, really.
Oh yeah, yeah,
Uh, so I think there is that constant kind of fascination. And I think if you're from Western Australia, the US is the number one investor into Western Australia, but China is the number one nation for export. So you kind of track what happens in both of those countries quite intently, and it was a big thing. I feel it was genuinely. I was on a call with people from a lot of other countries recently, and there were people from Esberg and, all sorts of different countries that were all fascinated by the result of this particular US election. Um, so, it's addictive almost following I thought.
yeah, yeah. It's interesting that you mentioned that, and it's an interesting thing that in Western Australia, right? And perhaps it extends more to Australia, but Western Australia definitely because of the big mining, and resources community there. That the incoming is sort of American and the outgoing is Chinese, and these are the two superpowers of the world, really, when it comes down to it.
Mm.
And uh, Western Australia must have to be so, and this is crazy, right? Because I'm not sure that this is true about Western Australia and the political system in Western Australia, but they do, or they should be, really politically savvy to be able to deal with that kind of tension of those two forces, one, that are opposed to each other, that Western Australia is sitting in the middle of, and trying to appease both or make both happy. And it kind of calls for like a really astute government system, but I think it doesn't have that. I think also though your premier is just scoring through the roof at the moment, right? He's like his popularity is extremely high, right?
Yeah, I think for a while there might still be the number one most supported politician in Australia, I think.
Yeah, I think, and rightly so. I think because he's done a good job, right? He did a really good job with the COVID and all that sort of thing, and the way he handled it, I think, was like very professionally, and also very wisely. It seems in hindsight.
Yeah, I mean, I think people, and I don't know, maybe it's just a cultural thing, but I think over here people kind of were, I wouldn't say happy, to go, to do what they needed to do earlier on. But yeah, I would suggest most places that got a hold of it and shut down when they had to prevent it spiraling, have probably in the end been validated in terms of making that a decision. That's worked and been respected by people. But I guess it would be still very different if you were in a different, more populated place.
Yeah. Do you think the West Australian population kind of see? Like, I'm sure that when COVID hit, right, it was like, oh, fuck this, I don't want to be locked up, and like, this is bullshit. And, I know that happened at the start, right? And I think it happened in a lot of places, not just Australia. But people were like, man, this is insane. I'm losing all my liberties and that kind of thing. But do you think now, like, people in Western Australia are more calm and perhaps even a little proud of how they dealt with it? That like in hindsight, with the hindsight of where Western Australia is at now, that they kind of like, hey man, we did the right thing. And do you think that?
Yeah, I think. Well, yeah. I mean, I don't know whether you'd call it proud, but I think on a lot of levels, there's been a lot of people willing to do the 2 weeks quarantine that have left, a lot of those more popular cities that you're in a real hurry almost, I think, culturally in Perth to get out and see the rest of the world when you're a certain age. And I think in some professions you kind of almost have to leave Perth to cut your teeth, or you would feel that you need to do that. And then I found, when something of this nature hits, people really do have that pull back to home, because you suddenly find all those things that kind of, in comparison to other cities, are actually, much better, but you almost need to leave Perth to appreciate it.
I agree. I think there's a lot to that. There's a lot in there about a lot of what you said there about Perth is a great place to start something, but and to start to learn something, and because it's smaller, you can get better at something without having as much competition. I think perhaps because there's just less people competing with you for that industry. But to gain the experience required to progress sort of, to what you might call next level in the thing, your chosen pursuit, you've kind of got to leave Perth to do that and come back, I guess, or not. But I think I know a lot of people who were living overseas who had done that, and had progressed. Some of the people that I've interviewed and that kind of thing have been happy to come back to Perth, very happy to return. And I guess, like, what you're saying there is about seeing Perth in a new light, and perhaps, a different light than what they, obviously had to feel to leave to progress. But also, now that I've gone out of Perth and learnt the things that I needed to learn, I can come back to Perth, and I could actually probably make Perth my home base, whilst traveling to other places to get things done. But it ain't such a bad place to be, especially if there's a pandemic.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, so getting back to the pandemic thing, so in the Daniel High 1.0, we talked about online music and platforms, like gaming platforms, that offered concerts, right? Which I thought was a really fascinating thing. And since we've spoken about it, I get the feeling that kind of that's probably dropped to the background for some people, but I just thought it was a fascinating idea and a really awesome idea. And I think also a really untapped medium for people to explore things, like I'm almost, okay. So, well, let's go back because obviously that's not available. Daniel 1.0 is not available. So let's go back to what we're talking about and let's go through that again. So what was the platform? It was...
Oh, it was Minecraft.
Yeah,
Yeah,
right.
Minecraft did a massive, well, they called it a rave, but yeah, there was stages, well, not stages, but, little worlds built for different record labels. And then there was literally a huge lineup of DJs that were, going to live stream from Minecraft. And like I said, they had all sorts of issues, I think, with the licensing, and it kind of didn't, everyone got refunded in the end, which was good. But I still loved the concept, I guess, of it was almost like that, how these kind of parties used to be quite underground or whatever. It felt really interesting to be experiencing that ethos in a video game, but for music, not so much gameplay. But you wonder if such an idea would ever have even kind of come about if so many DJs, had nowhere else to actually play. But it's quite an interesting concept, and one I think, we will see, much more hybrid type events. People may not be willing, or they might not even be able to sell as much space in clubs. So having a backup if you can't physically experience something, being able to live stream it, I feel is probably going to be where a lot of music does need to go in the meantime, especially if a 2 meter rule is kept in place. And people still love to experience music. It's kind of like watching Nirvana's unplugged. You can still feel an incredible amount from a performance like that without necessarily having to be there, live. And not that many people would get in to see something like that live, but it's still amazing to experience. And I'm sure there's still a lot of bands or performances that it would be very difficult, even if you're really into it, to see in the next kind of 2-3 years, as a lot of this travel stuff slowly has become unraveled or gets put back together. So in some way, it's kind of improved access, I think, depending on the type of stuff that you're into.
Yeah.
And I know just from now knowing much more about when certain things are live streamed, I feel I've, really got out of a bit of a rut of just going to, the same old labels or the same old artists. Just seems to be, you're able to be exposed to so much more stuff out there than you might have been before, because you'd have to kind of physically go somewhere to experience it.
Yeah, it's a really interesting idea, this idea of the hybrid performance where there's say, I don't know, whatever percentage of live attendance, and then the percentage of live streamed, and especially how easy it is now to live stream. Like people can do it you can do it from your phone, to live stream. And so I'm really hopeful in the future that will happen, but also I'm really hopeful that the online gaming thing as well, all of those kind of platforms that are available will allow us to still maintain some kind of community whilst also attending in whatever capacity. These things work. I mean, I'm not an advocate of people like goofing off at work or whatever, but also if you're at a concert and your friends are at a concert and that concert's live streamed and you're at work and you've got work to do, right? And you do your work, but you can also have that concert sort of live streamed on your phone, and you can talk to your friends on the weekend or next time you see them about that concert, because you know what happened because you were kind of there, in
Totally.
like
They're doing some of that stuff. I think at the Perth Concert Hall, they're kind of recording some of the symphony performances in virtual reality, so that you could literally log on from another country and still almost get this kind of symphony orchestra
experience
style, experience, and kind of choose a little bit where you choose to see it from. And I think, over time, if it becomes more popular, people will be able to address issues of sound quality, and, you'll be able to get receivers at the other end that really replicate the sound, or the sound gets mixed in a way, that will allow you to kind of almost even appreciate some elements of where it's actually occurring. It's pretty exciting.
Yeah, I mean, even visually, with like, things get recorded now in 4K and 8K. Like I record this in 10p, but or 1080p, but it's like that's. I remember when 1080p was HD, and that was like unreal. You get,
Yeah.
wow. Now it's 4K, it's 8K. Insane picture quality. And I'm sure that audio is, going down exactly the same road. The quality that I can get on just this podcast, the audio quality that I can get from a very low budget setup is, really good quality for, what might have been available 10, 20 years ago. And I'm sure that what's available now in the sound aspect as well. And when you're talking about like symphonies and going to a symphony and then 360, that this, the audio setup will match, I think, the video setup, the quality. And these things are just going to be mind blowing, I think, later on in,
Mm.
however they come out.
I was literally, I've been getting right into vinyl mixing again, which is, you know, something I've kind of always wanted to do, but I think I only got my own turntables together probably about 18 months ago. But doing a lot of research, and I've got some really good needles, but even just learning that different brands of high quality needles replicate sound in certain frequencies much better than other
Yeah,
needles, even though
yeah.
the other needles are really expensive. Just really kind of interesting because I guess a turntable or a turntable arms needle is almost a microphone, and that's why
Mm.
the theory is kind of some types of music sound better on vinyl is because they actually to a degree take on some aspect of what's happening in that room by virtue of a needle actually being a microphone and
Yeah.
therefore still reflects some things when it colors the sound. So highly theoretical, and I'm sure I would never be able to tell the difference, but it did get me pretty excited to try some other needles.
Yeah, definitely. So I grew up with vinyl, right? So, at my home we had, pretty nice. We had quadraphonic, which was
Mm.
like pretty high tech back in the day. A quadraphonic setup. My dad, although he was a tradesman, it was very into music and very musical, and liked good quality sound. And we had a lot
Mm.
of vinyl. And I didn't like a lot of what he listened to, but I could buy records and listen to them as well. And even like later on, getting into the 80s the 80s with sort of the techno-ish sounds, a lot of electronic music, was abound in
Mm.
the 80s. I got to understand a lot about needles and the sound quality that comes,
Mm.
and the stuff that's recorded in studio on live instruments has that warmth and, like you say, color to it that
Mm.
is, you lose it. I mean, as soon as it becomes electronic, you lose that. You really do
Mm.
lose that. I mean, and so, okay, yeah, it is a form of electronic because it's a needle and that, but the way it's recorded and that sound, like even the electronic albums, whilst you get great sound of electronically recorded albums that are recorded to vinyl, you do get really great sound, but it's not the same as a guy playing or an orchestra playing
Mm.
instruments tactilely, just by
I'd agree
touch.
with that.
Yeah, and
I
it's
feel that
fascinating.
too, Keith, that there's a new Kruder and Dorfmeister album, first one for about 15 years.
Yeah,
So
Yeah.
Um, worth checking out.
It's funny you say that, right? Because you and I were talking about that. You sent me a message about it, and my students at school the other day were, "Oh, can we have some music like while we're studying?" And I was like, "Yeah, we can. We're going to listen to some Kruder and Dorfmeister." So
Nice.
I cranked up because we have smart boards that are connected to the internet, and even though China, it does control a lot of what comes in and what doesn't go out, you can get some cool stuff. And so it took me a bit to find K&D, but I got Bug Powder Dust, man, and I totally love Kruder and Dorfmeister's remix of Bug Powder Dust. And so I cranked it. I cranked it for him in class, and I turned it right up. I was like, and they're going, no, it's too loud. It's too loud. I'm like, no, it's not. We're listening to this, and I loved it, man. And I was like in heaven. I was just, yeah, this is cool. They wanted some music to do work to, and I was like, well, yeah, I'm the teacher, and I get to say so. You know what? I'm saying yes, but they wanted to listen to K-pop because K-pop's in Asia is just
huge.
the
Yeah.
thing, right? I mean, insanely popular, and but synchronized dancing and all that kind of thing, and obviously I'm not that generation, and so it's not overly exciting for me. But I'm the teacher.
Should have gone some Akadaka. They got a new album out too.
Really?
Yeah.
Now I'm interested in that. I didn't know that, and I'm interested in that because who's playing? Because Malcolm died.
Yeah.
And
So well, uh, there's actually a 60-minute interview on it tonight. Because
wow.
the other guys are still very well, not upset. Well, they are upset,
Yeah, of course.
because there's only a couple of them left. But yeah, it's called Power Up. Is the name of the album.
Yeah, right. And is that Brian Johnson? Is he singing in that?
Yeah.
Yeah, right. Because
So yeah, so the departure and yeah, Johnson, Rudd, and Williams back in the fold.
yeah, okay. Because that's really
Yeah.
interesting. Because Brian Johnson, I remember, had some problems. I think now I could be just
Yeah.
talking out my ass that he had some problems with his voice for a bit. I
Yeah,
mean,
with his throat, I think.
yeah,
Yeah.
he's getting on.
But I reckon, if there's one formula AC/DC know and don't generally tend to deviate too much from
Yeah.
without ever messing up, it's that. So
Oh,
I'm sure it'd
absolutely.
be worth. I'm sure it'd be worth a crank or two.
Yeah. Well, my students, if I play them anything near to just even blues music, they are, why?
Yeah,
Why are you punishing
yeah.
us? But I like to punish them. I think it's good for them to hear different types of music. And on that, I was at a bar here a couple of nights ago, and a Chinese fella played me some really awesome Chinese music that I guess I heard, and it seemed to be somewhat stereotypical in the sense of the type of instruments that were playing, but still very beautiful. And he told me it was sort of like historical Chinese music, but I really loved it, and it was so relaxing and just it was really wonderful. It was really wonderful to hear it. So yeah, just a bit plug there for the Chinese music because it was really nice
Yeah,
and it
cool.
was classic. He also played me Richard Clayderman playing some Chinese classic on piano, and I lost all interest in that. But I really enjoyed the traditional Chinese instruments playing the traditional Chinese music, and that was the one really got me. It was really good. But ACDC, yeah, well, I do it, man. I kind of play it to my students from time to time. I'd love to have it for my theme music on this podcast. I'd love to have a drink on me. I'd love that to be my, have a drink on me. No, 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 no. Yeah, I'd love that, man. That would just be like my intro coming in, boom, have my logo, and then boom, have a drink on me. That'd be
Well,
wicked.
I actually pulled out all of my band music on vinyl. I've got a lot of hip hop,
Yeah, yeah.
and that's generally quite old hip hop.
Mm.
That's generally what I like to mix on
Yeah,
vinyl. But I've got a lot of, I guess, just those really seminal albums from my era
yeah,
that are like the band albums. So, Soundgarden's Bad Motorfinger, Violent Femmes,
yeah, right.
that first Violent Femmes album, a bit of Akadak, a lot of Nirvana,
Yeah, yeah.
that those kind of bands that were very much my year 9 to 12, kind of first couple of years of uni,
Mm.
kind of bands, and a lot of Dead Kennedys. Loved just hearing that kind of music on vinyl still.
Yeah, yeah. I'd love to get some Henry Rollins on vinyl. I reckon that'd be unreal.
Yeah.
I so we with the school we had to go and do a hike, like a mountainous hike, and with my school normally these mountainous hikes are hikes and steep, and so I was expecting, right, I need to get myself some motivation for this to get into it. I need to get myself some music and get try and pump myself up to get ready for it, so that I don't have a heart attack and die. And I just thought, what's better than Henry Rollins, for that? So I started listening to Rollins again because I haven't listened to him for a long time. I find that somehow in life, when it's kind of a sign of life getting on top of you when you're not listening to music. I go through years. I mean, I have years where I haven't been, where I've just got home, cranked the stereo, and, I just want to listen to that.
Mm.
I have years that I go through where I don't do that. And I find that it's often a symptom that in my life, I'm kind of being weighed down by something.
Mm.
It's sort of, there is a freedom to music. Like when you listen to music, it kind of, I don't know. I don't know if there are studies done on the effects of music on
I've
the
had a friend
psychology.
say the exact same thing, that they've I started sending them some sets, or just bits and pieces, and they'd been through a tough couple of years, and they literally said the same thing. I was never as happy as when I was back listening to music, and a
Yeah.
lot of my happiness stopped when I stopped listening to music, or stopped following music that they were into.
Yeah, I mean, it's an interesting thing because talk about psychology and even I was watching an interview the other day about antidepressants, right? And about what what things we think about things. When you say antidepressant, people automatically think of drugs, right? You're taking antidepressants, but many things have been shown to be antidepressants. And I guess what I'm saying here is that kind of music might be one of them that stops you, and works chemically in your brain as much as a chemical antidepressant might. That when you start being more connected with people, when you start, you know, being part of something and also feeling creativity and exploring your own creativity or enjoying other people's creativity or whatever, might be antidepressants as well,
Mm.
and not just
I think it's just
chemical.
even just bringing back good times or good memories or good relationships. There's nothing quite like music to bring those kind of feelings back. There's albums I can still listen to now that just instantly take me back to,
Yeah,
almost what feels like a different life. But I still love those albums, and I know almost every groove in them. But
yeah.
it almost instantly takes me back to the type of things I was thinking or doing or in that era. It's bizarre.
Yeah, there's a connection. There's definitely a connection. And I was watching a thing. I can't remember when, but it was a thing about the what they were saying was that when you're going through puberty, the music that you listen to going through puberty in those formative years of like when your body changes and endorphins and things change in your brain and your chemistry and all that changes. The music that you listen to then is the music that kind of becomes the most fond, I guess would be the best way to describe it. Like your fondest memory, your musical memory.
Yeah,
And that
makes
seems to,
sense.
yeah, it does. It made a lot of sense to me when I heard it as well, that that's what happens. And, you know, yeah, it's funny that you were saying AC/DC because that was kind of Back in Black got released about when I was about 15, I reckon. And it was kind
I literally have lined up on vinyl that exact album, like ready to get a spin shortly.
of, it's a, man, that's an unreal album. Like, seriously, I rate that. I rate that probably as AC/DC's best album. And I know a lot of Bon Scott fans would be like, fuck off. You're full of shit. That's not real. Like, you know, Bon Scott was the man and, you know, Brian Johnson was the ring in and all that stuff. But, man, Back in Black was a hell of an album. That was a hell of an album.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah,
Brilliant
beautiful.
album.
Yeah, totally.
And I think maybe that's one of the things, you know, as music becomes so consumable. I mean, literally just before I was going through particular artists and picking tracks that I would, you know, purchase to mix later digitally. But it's a very different approach to having the time to listen to an actual album, and you know, an album's still a really important part of music for me. You know, not
Yeah.
just a collection of singles,
Yeah.
but an actual album that has a start and a finish, and you know, takes you you know, through a narrative. That's still for me in terms of music is a really really important benchmark of a band. You know, if they can actually, you know,
Yeah. Yeah.
time and time again create an album and not just a loose collection of collaborations and
Yeah.
singles, you know.
Yeah.
And so much music these days, it's you know, it's this it's the artist doing the album with so and so on every single track, you know. And I'm like,
Yeah. Oh, man.
um
The
nothing like a
commodification.
band that can still just, you know, crank out an album of their own stuff without needing 1,000 guests, you know?
Yeah, yeah. Well, and also, uh, not just collaboration, but the commodification of music has turned it into sound bites almost. You know, there's
Mm,
no who's making Dark Side of the Moon these days. You know, no one's making a Dark
mm,
Side of the Moon an album that requires a lot of your time to sit down and listen to, and that I've listened to hundreds of times, I'm sure, in my life.
mm,
Dark Side of the Moon,
mm,
and it still stands up for me. It's still just a masterpiece, you know, of
mm,
musical creativity and you know, Frank Zappa used to say this about his music, but I think it applies to Pink Floyd as well. It's you know, Frank Zappa said that his music was 1,000 motion pictures for your ears. And
mm,
I think Pink Floyd is motion pictures for your ears. You know, when you listen to it, your brain does a kind of all this work and, you know, real creative work,
mm,
and takes you to a space where it's impossible to get to without it. Like
mm,
you wouldn't go there without listening to Dark Side of the Moon, and in that sense, I'm really really afraid and fearful for the coming generations of how much they're going to miss out on that effect of music. Whereas the effect for them now is I'm going to watch all these synchronized dancers dancing, doing all the this and this business
yeah.
and all that, you know, and, you know, kudos, it's, you know, difficult. It's difficult to choreograph and it's difficult to learn and to do while you're singing and all that sort of thing. So I respect the talent of being able to do that, but it's not Dark Side of the Moon. It's not Jimi Hendrix.
No.
It's not an album. It, like you're saying, like something that requires an investment of
Mm,
time. You know, it seems to be that, and again, I go back to the internet for this as well. That we're being trained that everything must be, you know, 10 seconds or 15 seconds,
Quick.
or, it's just got to be done. I get my fix, I get my endorphin rush, and on to the next little bit of that, where we're kind of missing out on the value of that long journey again, of going into
Mm.
something really special. Like even the wall, on vinyl, you had to turn it over. It's like,
Yeah, yeah.
yeah, you had to get both sides of it, or even on cassette, you had to turn it over. But it was, you know, an epic journey that took you on this
Yeah, yeah.
massive story that took you somewhere, and something that you kind of could relate to, and you felt really deep emotions. I feel, I when I think about Pink Floyd, I think I have quite deep emotions of connection, and I'm like, yeah, I'm with you on that, and yeah, you kind of get involved with it, and music seems to have lost that, and it seems like, I don't know, will it come back? Is it possible that bands will make albums like that? But I mean, even to go with what you were saying before about albums and music, um, even other bands have produced albums that are not as narrative as Pink Floyd, but it's still an
Mm.
album that you want to, like, you hear one song and for me, and this is, I'm a pre-internet person, so, you know, maybe that's the thing, being a pre-internet person, we still have that appreciation for sitting down and spending an hour with an album and
Mm.
listening to, you know, something really, really
I reckon
good.
all the Run the Jewels albums are, pretty good to hear in entirety in recent times.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
it's rarer and rarer, I think.
Mm, definitely. Yeah, yeah, like, hear me on stage, I can't even get it out how rare it is and how
Mm.
worrying it is that it's like, albums were like musical books. They were like a book. You needed to spend time with it. You needed to spend time with it. But also, I think when you did spend time with an album, you walked away from it enriched. And I
Yeah,
and I
I'd
would
agree with that.
say definitely now, I don't think that you would walk away from a K-pop single feeling enriched.
Mm.
I don't think
Mm.
there was sort of a value to it. Yeah, it's. Do you know the album Strays?
Jane's Addiction.
Yeah, Jane's Addiction.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, that to me is like probably like one of those albums that was like just like Back in Black, like one of those albums that's not non-narrative, but just
Mm.
bang, bang, and phew, here it comes, here's that
Yeah.
music, and it takes you somewhere, like a book, when you read a book, you go somewhere. When you read a book in your mind, you go somewhere, and those kind of albums are albums that take you somewhere. They take you
Mm.
sort of out of where you are to another place, which I think it seems to be a necessary thing for human beings to go to these places in your mind that are, I don't know how you would say it. I mean, is it like, uh, meditation, or, like people meditate to go to other places or whatever. But I mean, does it have that kind of element to it? I'm not sure, but they take you somewhere else, and there's something in your brain wants to explore things, explore ideas, being guided obviously by the artist, but still, as a concept, as a whole idea, someone's talking emotionally about something, or something like that. Yeah, it just seems to be with albums are like that. But again, to go back to K-pop, I'm just gonna rain on K-pop because, okay, I can, and I don't care really. But it doesn't. Manufactured music is really what I'm talking about. Is the stuff
Mm.
that's now being just completely commodified and being put out there just purely to make money. You know, it's like the internet of music. It's like we're just hitting the biggest numbers. Where can we get the biggest numbers?
Mm.
Well, it's almost like what musical notes get us the best purchasing power, and so we'll just keep doing those. You know, it's not about
It's
even.
probably more of a whole entertainment package because you wonder how some of that stuff would go without the film clip, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, absolutely. I completely agree with you. And it's unlikely that we'll ever know because it's always going to be with the film clip. Like I think
Mm.
music now is has become a video medium more than a musical medium in when I'm talking very generally, but I'm saying percentage wise, music now being sold is more a visual medium than a musical
Mm.
medium as it used to be. Like considering things like vinyl or that kind of medium.
Yeah, no, I'd agree with that for sure.
Yeah, it's a scary thing. But so let's get on, like, while we're here and talking about music, s- run us through some of your faves, bro. Some of your favorite music.
Oh, look, probably. Look, it just depends, really. Like, there's band music that I love, and that I love to listen to, particularly after I've done a lot of, mixing, just to go somewhere completely different and to feel, just different frequencies. Because
Yeah.
usually when I'm mixing, I'm quite focused on the drums and the bass elements, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
So there's nothing like a guitar, like a really fuzzy, distorted guitar in a mid range, just because it's a nice, different sound to what I do. I guess, I really like to mix stuff that's quite bassy. I like to mix in, most of my sets have lots of different elements, but generally, bassy house, breaks, and a little bit of kind of dubsteppy kind of type stuff thrown in. So just a lot of variation in the bass, and I like a lot of variation in beat when I'm mixing.
Yeah.
So there's a bunch of tracks I might like or get, not necessarily because they would be something that you'd listen to in itself, but because it kind of fills a gap in a set, or
Yeah.
it
Yeah.
adds something to the tapestry of sound that you're working with. Could be some tablas over the top that could come in, as a nice element when you're taking more of a mixing approach.
Yeah. Do you
Um,
do you draw upon, like we're saying, the stuff from earlier on in your life? Do you draw upon that, or what inspires you in that direction? Are you inspired by things like places you've been, or venues, or concerts, or something? Even where
Yeah,
you've heard a good
I think
DJ,
so.
or
Yeah, like some of the really big UK clubs that I've been to, I still like to get the artist mix. Like Fabric, they do really cool artist mixes from like live at Fabric, and they're the whole series of those. There's hundreds of them, but they're all actually always, kind of a quality. And then there's nothing like being able to bring in, tracks from when you were going out or clubbing into a modern set, and have them still, like good tracks are good tracks, particularly, in that kind of dance forum. If it's well produced, it's always gonna sound well produced in a club. So you can kind of have some fun bringing in old stuff, and quite often, you'd find no one's of an age where they'd even know it's old. It's kind
yeah,
of funny now. But I still love to go back to band music, rock music, just punk music. But I guess sometimes my affinity with that is whether I'm organized to have it on my iPod, if you know what I mean.
yeah,
Whereas
Yeah.
because I got it on vinyl, it's sometimes nice just to chuck it on and potter around and do stuff, and
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
have a bit of music like that blaring. So, and then the other conflict I have is how many different formats do you need the same music on? So, I got a lot of old hip hop electronically or on CD, but sometimes it's still nice to get something a third time on vinyl, which is ridiculous.
Yeah.
But it is fun, because mixing on vinyl, you don't have the benefit of a screen showing you the waveforms to
Yeah.
line up the beats. So
Yeah.
it's all hand and ear, which is a really nice kind of basic level to take it all back to that. I wouldn't say makes it harder, but it's a bit more satisfying.
Yeah, well, also it's more tactile. When you're actually
Yeah.
engaged physically with something and touching it, and manipulating
Mm,
it by hand. There's an element to that that's wonderful, right? Like
mm,
in whatever thing that you've chosen as your art form. So I'm saying like even with woodwork or anything like
mm,
that. You can buy shit from IKEA and put it together, or you can feel what that feels like with a chisel and a lathe, and finding out what that
mm.
feels like, or a welder and turning metal, or all those kind of things, touching and being engaged with the work, touching it and feeling it and
Yeah.
making it.
That's always, I mean, I think that's why I bought turntables, is just as far back as I can remember, there was just always something special about winding back vinyl on a turntable, just the feel of the vinyl on your fingers and,
Yeah,
like a nice Technics turntable. It's like the platter almost floats on that, and
yeah.
it almost has no weight, and there's lights, and it's just always been a really pleasant thing. Like, I remember how excited you'd get if you'd be able to go around someone's place for a mix and everything was set up, and just the feel is it's such a beautiful feeling.
Oh, yeah, I agree. I agree. I know what you're saying. And that is that uh, you kind of lose something in the the electronics is more precise. It's more precise, and you can
Mm,
be more defined with what you can do with electronics. But there's a wonderful thing that happens when it's not electronic. When it's and
mm,
even in a mistake or something else that just
totally.
ends up being something really cool when you're doing it, right? And those things just don't
Totally.
happen with electronic. Looking at waveforms and syncing that and doing that, and
Mm,
it's very precise in it, and also, and this is what I think we're losing with the idea of the commodification of music is, and not to say that music hasn't always been commodified. I mean, it has. It's always been something that's been saleable and used to make money and those kind of things. But so I guess maybe the hyper commodification of music nowadays, where it's just produced to produce an effect and to be sold, and also not lasting, not yeah. Okay, so I've just had an idea, and that idea is something that I talk to actors about, and people who write scripts and stuff. Is the idea of authenticity, and there's something that's not authentic really about electronic music. That
mm,
you're not conveying a feeling. I mean, you can, through in that electronic sense, but you convey a feeling more when you play a song that you wrote that was about something that happened to you, and it gave you an intense emotion, enough emotion for you to write a song about it. uh, then there's this authenticity, and that seems to connect with people, right? And I think that
mm,
that becomes the things that we consider to be timeless classics, because so many people say, yes, that happened to me, or yes, I understand
mm,
that feeling. It may not have been exactly the same, but I get what you're saying, man, because they feel what you feel, and you've expressed what you're feeling, which is
mm.
kind of the antithesis of the electronic, uh, full commodification style music,
Mm.
you know, for a market, you know, like aiming for a
Mhm.
market, hitting the market, getting the target, getting the money, next thing for the target. This is like launching missiles almost
Yeah, it's
to
almost like
targets.
the difference between content and art, isn't it? You know?
Yeah, it's really. I mean, I think it's an interesting thing that just doesn't really get discussed enough. You know, especially in public forums where we look at the idea. You know, things always seem to be about, well, what are they going to get out of it, and you know, blah 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 blah. You know, and there seems to be kind of two schools of thought with it. That one is the capitalistic idea of it's gonna be a success because it made a lot of money, and then there's the other side of it that is it's going to be a success because a bunch of people walked away saying, "Wow, you know, I
Mm.
got something from that," you know, and
I think there's always a bit of a return to those those other aspects when things get almost too transactional.
yeah,
You know, things get transactional, and then people actually do almost go, something is missing. And
yeah,
I keep hearing that sales of vinyl have gone up. The last 3 4 years. And everyone thought it was dead, but there always tends to be a bit of a rally against those trends once they become a bit too populous, if that makes sense.
yeah. Maybe I think going back to what you said earlier is that people feel that there's something missing. I think that's the
Mm.
thing. I think that's the key that people, uh, you know, you can get like a great rush line, you know, that was great or whatever, you know, from some kind of video show, and you know, and it's a slick production and it's really good, you know. Like, I'm not saying that K-pop isn't really good at what it does. I mean, it's really excellent at what it does, but it's not going to feed the person who broke up with their girlfriend, maybe. I mean, and
No.
maybe it will, or you know, maybe it
Yeah.
does, because you know, from what I understand from people who translate some of that stuff for me at school, you know, who are Korean, who are in China, that tell me what the lyrics are and stuff. Um, Sometimes it is that kind of thing, you know, it is that
Mm.
story. There are those kind of messages in it, but it's not. It seems to be not the same, or not
You
the same.
can't swig a bottle of bourbon to it, you reckon, and enjoy your own misery, Keith, enough.
Absolutely, absolutely. Which I have done many times with listening to blues music. But yeah, I mean, and again, this comes back to the idea of authenticity, where you do feel like swigging a bottle of bourbon and sitting down with that because it's real, and it's almost like you're drinking with a friend, you know, when you're drinking with that music.
Mm.
Whereas
Mm.
I don't think the K-pop or the highly commodified music is really like your friend, you know, as much as
It's an acquaintance.
yeah, it's you know, you bumped into that, and you know, it was a fun experience at the time, and yeah, it's almost like a one night stand kind of thing, but it's not something you go back
Yeah.
to. Um,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah, I agree with that.
yeah,
Hey Keith, my wife's going to start vacuum cleaning very close to the door. I don't know if you can hear it in a second.
it's not going to show up on the recording. It's fine.
Cool.
Yeah, I can hear it, but it won't be on here. It's fine.
Cool.
But yeah, getting back to the music thing, it's we. I feel like we're almost in a situation now where we're trading that authenticity for like just instant gratification. It's almost like a wank. It's like you're
Yeah.
getting a wank, but you're not getting a romance. You know, if that's a
Mm.
good analogy for it, you know, with the K-pop thing. I don't know, to be so crude about it, but it does feel like it's sort of it's an instant gratification thing that's being marketed to us to fulfill. It's like maybe robot sex or something, you know. It's like it does perform the task, but it ain't as good as the real thing. Is I guess I'm asking, is playing an instrument in front of a microphone and recording it onto vinyl or even digitally, is that the real thing? Is that the real thing? What is the real thing when it comes to music? What is authenticity? Because it seems to me anyway, I wouldn't sacrifice anything over authenticity in a performance anyway of music or theater or movies or I think it's like the premium, authenticity seems to be the thing. What do you think?
Mm. Yeah, I don't know. There's some artists I find that can create an incredibly compelling feel from their music without any instrument necessarily having to be touched. From stuff like Burial, that's kind of all about feeling isolated and lonely in London. And, he just kind of rips stuff off YouTube and just creates layers and layers of sound that create a feeling. But you'd struggle to find any actual instrumentive performance in it. But, sometimes the weight of what he does has more feeling than, me hearing someone pick up a guitar, a million times.
Yeah, yeah.
So it's kind of,
Yeah, I get that.
it's kind of,
I really get that. Yeah. So, okay. Let me refine what I said. I think what you're talking about is also authenticity. I think
yeah, yeah,
he's communicating something that he's feeling via electronic
yeah,
medium.
totally.
Yeah, as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely, definitely. Yeah. So yeah,
So something
maybe.
like an Aphex Twin or a Square Pusher, it's almost unmimicable. Just how warped they get with some aspects, which, to me, I don't know even, is it genius? Is it madness? Sometimes it's kind of hard to tell, but they can still create a vibe or a sound, that's, you just don't even know how on earth they've done it, which, can be really interesting. Um, a lot of people will pick up a guitar and, leave you colder than anything, just the kind of stuff you hear at a pub, like it's not bad, it's not good, it's just, a cover band
Yeah.
singing other people's songs. But, I think that, like you're saying, there is an unfiltered rawness when someone's, shooting from the hip, singing from the heart, and has got a guitar, strapped to them. There is definitely something when it's done well that's hard to kind of achieve through other methods.
Yeah, that's true. And I think the guitar shooting from the hip live performance that is completely authentic does fill something. Yeah, it does fill something,
Mm,
but it doesn't fill everything. And
mm,
like I remember when you put me onto K&D and that Kruder and Dorfmeister album that
mm,
so many years ago, but that filled something as well. I
mm.
loved it. And it's something that I still remember. And like I said, I totally forced my students to listen to it. But it was, it's something that I really just love that Bug Powder Dust and how they did it, and a lot, and it
Mm.
was totally electronic and it was totally remixed and there was, things added to it that, were done by Critter and Dorfmeister that were beautiful, really beautiful
Mm.
things that added to that story.
Lots of
And
reverbs and delays, I reckon.
yeah, yeah, of course, yeah, and but also pitch bends and things that were moved right through it that made it an artistic thing. And I guess
Mm.
maybe what we're talking about here is that these kind of artistic pursuits show themselves in a way that commodified pursuits do not.
Mm. Yeah. Yeah, I'd agree with that. Definitely.
Yeah, and and because of that,
Because I
something's
guess those commodified things are usually about a lot of other things apart from just the actual music. You know, they're it's more of a slick marketing package of lots of things. You know,
yeah,
which like you say can be quite clever and brilliant in its own right, but certainly from where we come from, it's not. It's not the same. As music, like you say, it's meant to be consumed on phones by people that want to be able to mimic the movements, and
yeah,
and you get it and you understand why it appeals to kids, but you're not going to have a 40-year-old divorcee sitting down and putting it on for a night,
yeah.
to reflect on.
With a
you
glass of
know,
wine, yeah, it's not going to happen.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah. There's definitely something to that, and what we were talking about before, like when you were saying something's missing. I think, I hope anyway. One of my great hopes is that uh, people kind of feel that somewhat acutely. And this generation that's coming up now, I kind of hope that they feel that something is missing acutely, and they do turn to vinyl, or they do turn to old music, the things that have been before that people have found uh, enjoyable, and want to listen to them, like Eric Clapton or whatever, and they'll walk away from the K-pop thing, because K-pop isn't going to get you out of that place. Like K-pop's K-pop, and it does whatever it does, but it ain't gonna take you to somewhere special, or it's not gonna make you feel like you're understood, or you are
You're not going to lose your wife, your best friend, your life, your house to
country.
K-pop, are you, Keith?
Well, that's the old joke about country music, is like, you play a country album on vinyl backwards, and your house comes back, your car comes back, your wife comes back, your dog comes home. It's like the old joke, that backward masking joke. But yeah, there is definitely, I think, something to it, that the understanding of psychology and the understanding of markets and marketing and marketability. And of course, they're really smart aiming it at people that are going through puberty, because they know that it will be the stuff that they're going to remember, and that's going to take them through life, and they're going to want more of it later on in life.
Mm.
So that's strategically very smart from a capitalistic point of view. Like commodification is very smart to do that, but it ain't got that soul, And how do you talk about that? How can you talk about soul? How can you explain it, or define it? But it's a really important part of music. It's something
Mm.
that we need,
Definitely.
as people. Yeah. And I think,
Something you feel.
yeah, it's something. Well, I think it's a thing that you relate to, and you relate to when you're not a teenager, when life's dealt you a few blows, and you understand that everything's not how you thought it was, and things
That's why you
didn't.
need Violent Femmes. You need some early Violent Femmes albums. If you want to know about teen frustration, there's nothing better.
Yeah, well, maybe K-pop is filling the Violent Femmes position. I don't know, but it's we do. I think as human beings, uh, there's an old saying, music soothes the savage beast. And maybe it does more than that as well. I think, it inspires, and it takes us to other places, like we were saying before about Pink Floyd and bands like that. But again, I return to the thing where I really hope that uh, in the future, that this generation now that's just being fed this shit, being fed this music, that I'm hopeful that it won't be enough. You know, I'm
Mm.
hopeful that they're going to explore. And, you know, who knows? Maybe they're going to go right back to classical music and
I
understand it at
listened
a
to some
level.
shocking music when I was young, but
Yeah, yeah, yeah. People do.
so
People do.
I'm sure they will graduate on and find other stuff as well. You know, if you love music generally, you'll find a way to find older, or newer stuff, but you'll get there.
Yeah, I mean, I hope they do, but also, like, when you consider how the internet works and how it just keeps feeding you, like, whatever's popular or whatever's going around, and, you know, it gauges where you're at and it starts feeding you other stuff.
It's amazing. I find it hard to find the type of music I like, and this feels ironic.
Mm.
But it feels like iTunes is so set to hit certain things that even though I quite often search out stuff and I know there's lots of great stuff out there, it's actually like there's so much out there now, it's actually hard to find,
Yeah,
even with all the algorithms and everything, you know?
yeah, and
If I search very specifically for what I'm after,
yeah.
I don't find it on a lot of the modern flat platforms. It doesn't even get suggested to me, which is kind of weird. I guess it's just not popular enough to hit a lot of those algorithms in any way to be on the probability of getting served up to a lot of people.
Yeah, it's a strange thing because I find exactly the same thing as well. But also, it comes down to I don't even know how to search for some of the music I like because I like, I like swing jazz, you know, with a rockabilly vibe to it
Mm.
as well. But how do you search that? I mean, if you type in swing jazz rockabilly, they're going to send you swing, then they're going to send you jazz, and then they're going to send you rockabilly.
Yeah.
But they're not going to send you a mix or something that is a mix of
You
that
might
because
have to Google. You might have to Google it as a question. What bands are into swing jobs and rockabilly, and see what comes up. I'll bet you someone's asked.
oh yeah, someone's definitely asked, but you know, the amount of effort to find, like you say, you know, if you're a Trump supporter and you don't like Biden, you'll be able to get immediately something that will be anti-Biden, right? But when it comes to music, when you want to try and find something that you like and that goes
Yeah.
in the same kind of way, like where, you know, I want that same kind of feeling, you know, with what you send me for musically, it's incredibly hard to find it. Like, you know, I like Tom Waits, and
Mm.
then to find someone who's like Tom Waits, or even a different type of jazz, or even the old. There was an album out about 20 years ago called "Music to Watch Girls Go By." Came out, and it was like Dean Martin and those kind of guys, and that kind of feeling. It's still very difficult to find without just saying I want to hear more Dean Martin or that, but
Yeah,
to
yeah.
find that style is really,
Mm.
really difficult. And even a modern style of that where you end up with like Michael Bublé or, you know, a crooner, and it's like you
Mm.
get locked into something because it's uh, electronic versions
Yeah, I get what you
of,
mean.
yeah, well, like even when you ask about it, you can't kind of
Mm.
find it, you know, and that's really, you know, come on, guys, you tech guys, like give us an algorithm that gives us the music we want, you know. Like I'd really like to see that happen. That'd be a valuable thing more than getting a bunch of bullshit about whatever fed to me on Facebook all the time, you know. I'd I'd much rather a great algorithm that looked at what music you listened to and sent you more stuff like that, and things that are, you know, you might like this.
Mm.
You know, and
Mm.
even on a YouTube search, it doesn't seem to be like when I do a YouTube search on like AC/DC, I end up with like 80s glam rock bands that are nothing like AC/DC. And, you know, often they're bands that are around at the same time or whatever, but they're not AC/DC, and they're not things that are like AC/DC. And basically, when I search on YouTube for AC/DC, I want to hear AC/DC. I don't really want to hear like other glam rock bands, I'll go check them out if I want to hear them, but they're not anything like AC/DC. And I don't get things like Edgar Winter's White Trash, who had a very, very similar sound to AC/DC, but with Blues Brothers kind of feel, with like a brass section and that, which is really interesting, and I really love them, and I, really enjoy them. But I don't get that. It's almost like the sound profiles haven't even been sampled to work out what things are like.
Yeah, I think it would be more, what did other people who like that buy?
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
It would come very much back to the transactional side of it, which is sometimes a great indicator, particularly for some of the music that I mix, because people generally mix in genre.
Yep.
So, there's a certain thing that's, you've bought a certain label stuff, the people also bought can sometimes, help you find labels that will work in a mix. But like you say, it's definitely very different.
Yeah.
Hallelujah.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the guy that played guitar for Edgar Winter's White Trash was a guy called Rick Derringer. And he played an SG guitar, which is the same guitar that Angus Young plays, through a Marshall stack, the same as Angus Young, and was playing the Angus Young style of music before Angus Young. So Rick Derringer was playing basically like an AC/DC, that style a long time before AC/DC, in the 60s and early 70s. And so I guess what I'm saying is, like, when you're listening to AC/DC, why don't you get, these algorithms should, like you say, they're going off people, but they're not actually going off the substance that the people are actually looking for. They're going off what other people have found that are things that are similar, that are not the same as the musical content of that. That would be interesting. That would be interesting to have algorithms that feed from musical content and other things that have a similar musical content, like they do with like news stories that have a similar news story, that musical content might be the thing, and through musical sampling and finding, those waveforms that adhere to a certain style and sending you that, rather than just a bunch of other people that actually like Michael Bublé, and you don't give a shit about Michael Bublé and you don't want to hear that. Not that I'm saying that you don't, because I quite like Michael Bublé, but my point is that just because everyone else is listening to it doesn't mean I want to listen to it. I want to listen to something that, goes with what I like. And I like Frank Zappa, and try finding a musical thing that matches Frank Zappa. There are bands which I found through knowing people. And also that's a really interesting thing too, is that through knowing people, and people seem to have a better idea about what people like than computers do, I would think, actually.
I agree with that, definitely.
Yeah. So people seem to be able to defeat algorithms in that sense, that my friend in Thailand, an American guy, he was like, he's right into the Grateful Dead, but another band called Fish, and Fish are quite like Frank Zappa. So, I like Frank Zappa, and I've, been very interested to hear music that's similar to Frank Zappa. And then he said, well, you should check out Fish, But when I check out Frank Zappa, I don't get Fish.
Yeah, you never will, probably.
Maybe. I don't know. But it's a really interesting thing to think about, and to also explore that idea that people, communicating with people, and people who know you and get to know what you like, seem to know more about what you like than an algorithm. That algorithm seems to only perpetuate what you like, not take you somewhere new.
Yeah, I'd agree with that 100%. 100%.
Yeah, and that is a fascinating thing to me, especially in light of things like the social dilemma, where they talk about um, so much of how things are geared to perpetuate you know
Mm.
what you're doing, and maybe even ramp you up in that. Like, so if you're a conspiracy theorist, we're going to make you more a conspiracy theorist. Whereas if someone knows you and you have a good relationship with that person, like just a friend, in that sense, a real
I guess
friend.
it's trained to facilitate further interaction because it gets
Yeah,
paid for
yeah,
interaction.
yeah, but
I notice a lot of the media agencies do that just so deliberately, just put things out there that, just will generate not necessarily a fuss, but just generate a lot of activity because I guess activity governs transactions. You can't have a transaction without activity.
yeah, that's it exactly. And I guess what I'm saying is the way to undermine that is human connection. Like, so
Mm.
really, as simple as it sounds, is like, just putting down your phone and talking to people rather than just talking to people. But I think use your phone still and talk to people, but talk to people and be known by people. And it seems that that will lead to a more fulfilling kind of life than this kind of reliance on social media that social media is trying to develop in us, is trying to
Yeah, yeah. I've very much
cultivate.
moved away from a lot of things on social media now that I feel were, making me, I wouldn't say feel competitive, but, like, so I've disabled all of the birthday stuff because I just don't want to every birthday,
Yeah, yeah,
feel bad or good based on how many people say happy birthday.
yeah,
It's irrelevant.
yeah,
The people that I'm in close proximity to will always know, and it doesn't and that's not I've got nothing against people doing it, but I just thought, geez, how much time in my life am I going to comment on or expect comments on my birthday? And
yeah,
it's
yeah,
just
yeah,
not a for me. It's just not something I want to invest emotional or thought processes into.
yeah, yeah. No, I
I
get you.
very much just want to use social media as an information source as opposed to trying to, you know, portray myself on it, if that makes
Yeah,
sense.
yeah, yeah. Social media is a tabloid. It's a tabloid.
Mm,
It's
yeah,
kind of for fun, and maybe some of it's real. Maybe,
yeah,
maybe.
yeah,
If you're really
maybe.
lucky. The other, yeah, when you were saying about birthdays, I found myself becoming like a person that was really worried about, oh, should I say happy birthday? That because you get the notification and then there's the birthday and that, and like I remember getting birthday notifications that were HBD. Like, you couldn't even be fucked to type in happy birthday, like,
Yeah,
and becoming this kind of social media critic of like, well, I can see how much you care about me. You've just put in three letters instead of like the whole bunch that spell the
yeah,
words.
yeah,
Like, you don't even
yeah.
give a
And it's
half a
just
fuck.
like they're just those little things. I think I'm too old to lose time on that shit.
Yeah, and a great way to think about it, is that you are too old. We are too old to be wasting time on that kind of crap. Yeah. Well, this has been an awesome podcast, man. Do you want to keep going? How you feeling?
I actually do have to bail. I've
Yeah.
got a few things to do for the kids shortly. So
Yeah, yeah, no
yeah,
problem, man. No problem. Okay, well, hang in there at the end. Like, we'll sign off now, and we'll catch up a little bit just after this, and then yeah,
yeah, yeah, cool.
yeah, cool, man. So awesome. This has been Mr. Daniel High, and a good friend of mine, and a very creative thinker, and a person whose musical taste I really respect. And if ever he says something to me about music and about a suggestion of, hey, you should check this out, I've never been disappointed once Dan. Like every time you've said to me, "Hey, listen to this," it's been a great thing to listen to. It really has been, and I think you have. You're one of those people that I think in the world has great musical taste, and also a very musical open-mindedness. You you don't just get into I go with this genre or I go with that genre or whatever. You really have an open-mindedness to music and a real true love and passion about music, I think. And you seem to find music that seems to affect people really well. So, if Dan ever shoots you a message and says, listen to this, you should do it. That's what I reckon, because I think you have great musical taste, man. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, no worries. All right. So this has been Daniel High, and this has been a great podcast. And thanks, everyone, for watching. And we're out.